just call up our next speaker, which is Dan Hunter. Good morning, Dan. Great to see you again.
Morning, mate. How you going?
Very well, thank you. For those who don't know Dan, let me introduce Dan. Dan is the CEO for Business New South Wales. Dan's career has spanned finance, operational leadership roles across both private and public sectors. And today, as I said, he joins us as the CEO of Business New South Wales. I know Dan personally. He's passionate about being purpose-driven and really purpose-driven for Business New South Wales. He's aiming to bring value to the members, the businesses he works with, the economy, and the overall community. He's a strong believer in organisational culture and the role leadership plays and being visible in your leadership. And he believes these are enablers for success. Welcome, Dan, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, mate. Can I just check that you can see my screen okay?
I can, Dan. It's up perfectly.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. To begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'm coming to you from Camaragal country. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and all Indigenous people here with us today and in our wonderful organisation. I would start also by saying I applaud the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese's stance on the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I have this hope that it will give us as Australians our constitutional recognition for our First Nations people. So I will watch that closely. The reason I mention that, and I mention it a lot, is because I think as business leaders that we have a role to play in that, and we can play an active role in that to make that happen. Pleasure to be here today. Look, I am a bit nervous. I've always wanted to speak at the Human Synergistics conference. I've always wanted to take the stage or the virtual stage at the moment, and it's certainly going to be a career highlight for me. About 6 or 8 months ago, I had another career highlight for me. I'd always wanted to be interviewed by Lee Sales on 7:30. Now, a lot of you will know her. She's pretty fierce. I do quite a lot of media with this role, and I got the call up to do this interview on 7:30. And I was terrified that she was going to tear me apart. But at the same time, I had this sort of fanboy thing going on because we've all kind of been platonically in love with Lee Sales for quite some time. So, look, I managed to survive it. I hope I survive today. I hope I don't get in trouble with my wife, who I know is watching, for declaring that I've been platonically in love with Lee Sales. But there you go. I'm here and I'm ready to go. Look, my background, I've done a couple of CEO roles now, one in New South Wales Health for HealthShare, where I led an organisation of about 7,000 people. I was also the CFO for New South Wales Health and a Deputy Secretary for a period of time. That was during the pandemic, handling about a $30 billion budget. That was big. And now I'm the CEO of Business New South Wales. We're a policy and advocacy body. We also run some pretty large commercial businesses in apprenticeship support and a healthcare labour business, NDIS support, things like that. We're about 800 people, about $300 million turnover, and really honoured to be leading this fantastic organisation. What I've got for you today is our map for culture change. When I say it's our map, my head of people and culture, Zach Craig, obviously has rode shotgun with me on this journey, and it would be remiss of me not to mention her and how much of an influence that she's had on this presentation and everything that we've done here at Business New South Wales. I'm going to go through this. It's a 9-point plan. I know you're all keen to hear all 9 points. Fantastic. I can hear everyone cheering in the background. I'm going to focus up front, though, on the first 4 or 5 points of this journey, how it works for us, and my own personal experiences in this. First of all, you've got to be able to work on yourself. So as a CEO, you've got to be able to know the shadow that you cast and your own ego. Now, this LSI journey started for me back at Sydney Water when I worked there about probably 10 or 12 years ago now. I did my first LSI, a bit like the other speakers that went before me. Everyone's got their own personal journey. But if you don't get your own shop in order, it's very hard to lead an organisation through culture change. So I had this massive approval streak, had these green behaviours. How that played out for me back then, as I was new to the executive team on Sydney Water. I was fairly young at the time. I had this approval streak. What I would do in exec meetings, how it played out, is when a topic came that needed decisions, rather than lean in and give my own point of view very, very early, I'd wait to see how the breeze was blowing with the rest of the executive team. Particularly older males around the table, funnily enough. I would always listen to what they were saying, see which way the breeze was blowing, and then follow them. Now, this is not unusual for a lot of people. A lot of people have an approval streak. Understanding where it comes from helps. So I was privileged enough to do quite a lot of self-development work. I worked out that came from my childhood. Basically, it's parent issues or daddy issues. You know, you want to please your parents, you want to do things for approval. I was like a Labrador, right? So I'd want to go and fetch the stick, but I'd want to bring that stick back and I'd want a pat on the head every time. It was very, very strong. Now, addressing that personally is a good place to start. So I did the self-development. I've got to say a lot of it comes with age, life experience and maturity. You learn that you need to lean in and give your opinions early. You learn that confidence and you learn when to back yourself. But you've got to really work on your own leadership. Just one point on the LSI, quick story just quickly. I wouldn't try the tool set at home on your kids. Like I've got a photo of them here. I keep on my computer. I'm going to hold it up quickly. I've got these beautiful, beautiful wife and children now. I've got triplets, right? Three little babies there from 10 years ago. They're now 10 years old, right? And I was talking to my daughter this morning. She had her porridge out and she was very, very carefully putting the milk right around the edge and sprinkle, 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 sprinkle. And I said to her, Scarlett, darling, what are we going to do about your perfectionistic streak? And all she said was, whatever, Dad, leave me alone. So don't try it on your kids at home would be a tip from me. But work on your own leadership. It's not just about setting direction, motivating, inspire. It's my tips on leadership are around, a few things which I'll go through, but it's important to be yourself. People have got to experience you in the same way. Now, I kind of learned this from a guy called David McCubbin, who's well known in the human synergistic space, and he's an actor, right? And he was coaching me one day when I first came in as a CEO of HealthShare, first CEO gig, and I was practicing my sort of opening for the top 100 leaders. And he said to me, look, you're not acting, are you, mate? And he's an actor. And I said, no, but I'm trying to do this and this and this. And he said, look, you've got to be yourself. Otherwise, people will see you as fake. So whenever I have interactions with people right now, it's virtually, whether it's in the lift, whether I'm addressing a big group of people, whether I'm talking to the Premier, whether I'm at a barbecue, I try and be the same. I want people to experience me in the same way. Now, that's not to say that the language doesn't change. I don't tweak it and I don't sit up a bit more straight when I'm doing these things, but people have got to experience you in the same way, no matter where you are. Another thing that David said to me that day, David McCubbin said to me, was before I was about to take the stage as a CEO for the first time in front of my own organisation. He said, Dan, who's the most influential person in the room today? And I sort of ummed and ahed and stuttered and, not really sure. And he said, mate, if it's not you, then who is it? You're the CEO. You've got to grab this. And these people, they want to hear from you. You've got to grab it. So my other point is you do have to be able to understand the role that you play in the organisation and how influential you are. People see what you do. People notice what you do, and they notice everything. So you've got to be on the whole time. The other thing I think you need to be able to do when you're leading a team or an organisation, you do need to be able to make those difficult decisions. You do need to be able to draw on a hard edge sometimes, and you need that resilience. That's something I learned when I was in health. I spent 6 years at health. There was always a saying going on, in any organisation I've ever worked at, when things are going bad, someone would say, oh, well, don't worry about it. No one ever died, right? Well, in health, people do die. And we're at this pandemic, this bloody COVID thing a few years ago. I'm holding a senior role in health. It is on for young and old. And you know what? People are dying. People are going to die. And I think that resilience that you learn in those sorts of roles, again, age and experience, does help you become a better leader. You do need, you need to be able to humanize yourself. I did it just a second ago when I showed a picture of my family and my kids. You've got to be able to humanize yourself and show a little bit of yourself. The last thing I think you need to be as a leader is you need to be interested in people. Now, I was going through the Jim Collins Good to Great thing again recently. I need to be careful here because you don't really want to go against what Jim Collins said, but he was talking about the introverts being good leaders as one of the sort of the traits in that first study that he did. Now, I don't think you can be an introvert and be a good leader, basically. Introverts can probably be good leaders, but you have to get out there amongst your people, and you have to be genuinely interested in people. You need to be genuinely interested in what makes people tick. Because if you're not, then you won't get the best out of them. So that's my last bit. Now, I'm only on the second point, but the next point is build your baseline culture and build it early. You need to get a score and a marker card in really early when you take over a new team or a new organisation. So everyone else shared circumplexes, so I want to share a circumplex here. It's very technical the way I'm going to do it. But here is the LSI for the leadership team that I took over when I took over HealthShare. You'll see in 12 months where we moved it to and from. And that makes a huge difference to the organisation, right? This is the grouped LSI results. I'm going to flip it over, and this is the group LSI results for what I call the top 100 leaders. Again, 12 months here. This is the work that we did at HealthShare. Now, if you can change that culture of your top 100 leaders in your executive team, how they behave, how they show up, how they act, you will make massive progress very, very early. But you need to baseline your culture, and you need to do it early. So another little tip, this piece of paper here I printed off this morning. It was in my CV for the role that I won here as a CEO of Business New South Wales a year ago. Boards are interested in this. The board didn't hire me here because I was a good CFO or a good accountant. Their technical skills were up, and I don't think I was ever that good at it. They hired me because of my ability to change culture and change the direction of an organisation. So if you want to be a big leader and a good leader and a CEO, not necessarily a CEO, but just a good leader, then you need to be able to do this. The next point I've got here is to build a guiding coalition. So there's two ways that you can change this sort of result here with particularly your group LSI results when you group those together. The people can change, or you can change the people, right? And we don't talk about this very often, but sometimes as a leader, you need to get people off the bus and you need to get people on the bus. The reason at HealthShare we were able to move that so quickly is because we changed some of the people out. Now, it's difficult, it's not easy, but it is an art form. And if you're going to be a leader, I think it's something that you need to get very good at. It's something that will always serve you well if you can do this well, if you can make changes and do it in the right way and make sure people are looked after. The other one I think you can do when you're building this first team and building that guiding coalition is you should look for internal appointments. You should look for those hidden gems. And again, just a story just quickly. When I was at HealthShare, there was this amazing level 3 work leader, right? She was running most of the operations. Again, she was running about a 5,000 person workforce across the state. And she was amazing at what she did. Now, very quickly, I found her, I called her a hidden gem. I promoted her to the executive team, and she played a key role in my executive team and was the 2IC. Now, if we fast forward to when I left that role, one of the proudest moments in my career is that she followed me. Her name's Carmen Reckbauer. Shout out to her if she's listening. She's probably laughing now, but she won that role as my successor, and it was a really proud moment in my life because in my career, because I felt I'd played a role and helped her fulfill what she always rightly deserved, to be honest. Happened again when I left New South Wales Health recently, and a guy called Alfred D'Amato, my 2IC, took over from me. You've got to build your successes and you've got to look internally for promotion. Which brings me, sorry, just going to move that, but it brings me to making symbolic change. Now, this is important, and again, a great symbolic change. People need to see that the organisation is changing and the culture of the organisation is changing, I suppose. And if they don't notice anything, it hasn't happened. It's a bit like behaviour change with the LSI speak. If no one notices your behaviour has changed, then it hasn't actually happened. If no one sees symbolic change, it hasn't happened. Now, that was a great one that I just mentioned before, where you promote internally. Another good one is when people see new people come in and they hold themselves really, really well. Another quick story on symbolic change. Sometimes you don't even know when it's happened, right? So a quick story for you. There's a guy that works for us called David Stewart. He runs the biggest part of our commercial business, and he does a great job. Anyway, when I first started, we had a bit of a problem with our aging debtors profile for that part of the business. So a lot of people owed us money, right? So I asked him to come into a meeting with my CFO so we could talk about it. He thought he was coming, and this was really early on when I started, he thought he was coming in to see the CEO and the CFO for an ass kicking about his aged debtors, right? I sat down with him, we went through it, we went through what we were going to do. And at the end of the meeting, I said, David, what can we do to help you with this? What can I do to help you? Can I divert resources to you? Do you need me to pick up the phone and start to talk to some of the leaders of those organisations that owe us money? You know, is there something that we can do to help? Now, I didn't really think much of it at the time. About 6 months later, I was sitting with him having a coffee or a drink. And he said, you know, after that day, I went back to my team, my executive team, and I told them that story. And I said to them, there's a new game in town of this organisation team. We've got a new leader. He's collaborative and he's doing these great things. And he told the story of that story of how we were going to help with the aged debtors profile. At the time, I didn't even realise that was going to happen. But yet he gave that signal to the executive, his own executive team in the largest part of our business. And it was symbolic. It was symbolic for him and it was symbolic for our organisation. And I didn't even know it would happen. And it goes back to that earlier point on how you really create those symbolic changes and how you lead an organisation. I'll start skipping through though. Getting the top team to work on themselves is very important. We need them to look at those LSIs, to work out how they're going to work on themselves. You've got to watch out for the Smurfs. You know, the blue people that act blue, talk blue. Blue comes out of their mouth, constructive, but on the inside they're bleeding red, right? We call them the Smurfs. You know, they leave the room and they start acting red again. You've got to watch out for those people. You can normally see straight through them, but you've got to keep at people. And you've got to show some vulnerability in that. So you've got to be showing your own journey and what you're practicing on yourself. So for me, what I talk about at the moment, what I was talking about the last couple of days, is the background voices that go on for me. So at the moment, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm nervous about what people think. Crushing for me is if people are thinking at the moment, gee, this guy's a bit of a tool, right? Hopefully you're not, but it's crushing for me to think that, right? And it's this little background voice going on inside of me all the time. I've got techniques, I can shut it on and off and shut it down, but it's always there and it's something that I'm working on. And if you're working with your executive team or your team on their own journeys, you've got to share what you're working on yourself and your own vulnerabilities, I suppose. Skipping through, now we are on to developing an enterprise strategy. This is critical. We've just done this at Business New South Wales, and where we're at basically is we are socialising that with the wider group. It's critically important to do that, critically important to get on the road so that people see where they fit in the strategy, and you've got to touch a lot of people. Now, I know that came out a little bit wrong there, but you've got to get out on the road, share your strategy, explain how people fit in so they can be a part of it. Next up, you've got to revisit and adapt your values and behaviours. Now, again, we've just done that. That needs to be done in a bottom-up way. Don't sit in a room with your executive team and your CEO and your board and come up with new values and behaviours. You've got to do it from the ground up, and you've got to have people involved in that. And then you've got to communicate back to them that they were involved. Next up is to hardwire your values and behaviours. Next time I come back, if I'm ever invited, I'll go through these last 3 or 4 in a bit more detail. But you've got to hardwire your values and behaviours. You really need to link to the performance planning process, link to REM and bonuses where you can, but that's got to flow through right throughout the organisation. Finally, for me, I'll come back to you in a second, DB, but you've got to build that individual contribution framework. Again, our Business New South Wales, this is a journey we're just starting on, but we've got to really look into the individual goals, the team goals, and the organisational goals, and how they contribute to the organisational strategy and how we all achieve that organisational strategy. Look, to finish with, I think my key messages would be, as an individual, never stand still, never stop working on yourself. It's a continual journey, and you've got to stay on it, and you've got to show people what you're doing. Thanks, DB. I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be back with you. I'll get you to take your screen share down. We do have questions flowing, Dan. Dan, thank you very much. That was insightful and inspirational on so many levels. You've always been incredibly open, clear and transparent. So congratulations. And I think everyone, you have not been the tool. You've done very, very well.
I'm sure one of the 446 thinks I am, but that's okay. I can live with that.
It's okay. There's one question that kept resonating through there. And because you're a CEO and you've been CEO on numerous occasions, what advice would you give to CEOs who are sitting on the fence about their own development? They're just not quite there yet.
I think there's two things. I go back to that point that you always need to continue working on yourself. I think the compelling reason, though, is that in this day and age, it's just so different now. People won't work for CEOs that can't do culture and can't engage with their people and can't motivate them. Those days of the old CEO dinosaur, and they were normally men, DB, that are command and control and just use positional power. They are over. And if they're not over now, they will be very, very soon, because people will vote with their feet and results will go down. And none more so at the moment with the tight labour market that we're in. There's 500,000 empty jobs in Australia at the moment. If you can't work on yourself and work out how to lead, motivate, inspire, engage your own people, then you'll get left behind, and your organisation will get left behind. Things move very, very quickly now, and particularly these young people, if you're not working with them, then they'll just leave and your organisation will suffer. So I think that's a compelling reason.
Wonderful, Dan. Great response. We do all have to keep working on ourselves. We're all growing all the time. Thanks again for your time, Dan. It's been insightful, and I'd love to have you back for those last 4 points to more detail. Thanks for your stories. Thanks for what you've shared today. Stay well.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.